Call 911 quick, what's happening? Oh no! On the verge of tears, panicking right in front of me is the woman who has long held the #1 spot in my personal most disliked list and has just been promoted to my Hall of Infamy, my dreaded mother-in-law. Just for reference, the runner-up is the brown intruder that takes up residence in my home every summer without any invitation. I'd rather not even utter his name. Please take a guess. The reason she's made it to the Hall of Infamy is because from this point on, I won't have to deal with her in my life. Goodbye, mother-in-law. My name is Michelle, 29-year-old office worker. I'm about to hit my 5th year of marriage with my husband, David. We don't have any kids. Yet. My husband and I work at the same company. Initially, he was my boss. I fell head over heels for him shortly after I joined the firm. Maybe my youthful vigor played a part in my relentless pursuit, but eventually he gave in and we ended up marrying. I was under the impression that I had initiated a romance, but after we married, he said, "Actually, I thought you were wonderful from the moment you joined the company." I remember how happy I was to hear this, laughing at his post-marriage confession. David is somewhat cool, or to put it another way, he seldom shows his emotions. But that doesn't mean he's cold. Quite the contrary, he's extremely emotional. When we went to see a tearjerker that was the talk of the town, David started crying heavily quite early into the film. Seeing this man, who usually appears unfazed by anything, showing this very human side made me love him even more. Our gears seemed to mesh well, and though we'd been married for a while, we led a peaceful life without any major fights. Then, an event occurred that threatened our tranquil existence. It started with a phone call.
"Hello, Michelle. My daughter's going on a long business trip. I'll be lonely, so let's get along well. Well, you haven't done much as a daughter-in-law anyway, so it's about time."
What an annoyingly sarcastic message to receive after a long time of no contact. The caller was my mother-in-law, my husband's mother. From the moment we got married, she and I had never really gotten along. David knew this and told me I didn't have to try to get along with her if it was difficult. Of course, as a married woman, I wanted to be on good terms with my mother-in-law. But something unforgivable happened during our first Christmas gathering after the wedding. Before marrying David, I'd always lived at my parents' home, and regrettably, I wasn't good at cooking, relying too much on my family. When I made a fried egg, it was charred black. Once I moved out, I really appreciated my mother. When I tried to help with the cooking at the Christmas gathering, it didn't go well. "Oh, Michelle, how long are you going to spend peeling? You're really inconveniencing us." "I'm sorry, I'm not very good at cooking." "Huh? You can't cook? That's ridiculous. You're married to David and are still working. Isn't it about time you stopped?" I was ridiculed. Unable to retort, all I could do was force a smile. When we tasted the finished dish, it hardly had any flavor. Is this the taste of David's family home cooking? I thought. Then right in front of me, my mother-in-law started making a fuss. "What? You said you were good at making this dish, so I left it to you. Oh no, what is this? It's tasteless. Can you explain, Michelle?" She said this in a rather exaggerated manner. But I'd never said I was good at making the dish, let alone anything to her. I even asked, "Mother-in-law, do you not season your stew at all?" To which she glared at me. "The flavor comes from the ingredients. You don't even know that? How embarrassing." Is that so? Well, it might be somewhat true. I thought it would be better to add at least salt or soy sauce. But I had just followed my mother-in-law's instructions. In other words, her aim from the start was probably to embarrass me. I felt pathetic. Frustration welled up inside me, tears threatening to spill over. Is this what they call mother-in-law bullying? Will this go on forever? Such were my thoughts. Just then, my husband David suddenly stood up, took my hand, and headed towards the entrance. "Hey, what's happening all of a sudden?" My mother-in-law rushed after David in a panic, but he calmly put on his shoes. "Is it fun to start Christmas dinner with such a pointless argument?" he said to his mother, and then he forcefully shut the front door with me in tow. Throughout the ride home, David's phone kept ringing. Presumably, it was my mother-in-law. Seeing that David showed no intention of answering, I asked him, "The call, isn't it from your mom? Aren't you going to answer?" "She's always been like this. She loves belittling people, and that's why she got divorced from my father." David murmured, his gaze fixed ahead, his tone laced with sadness. When my mother-in-law realized David wasn't answering, she started calling me. David said it was fine to ignore her, so I did. Once she realized we had no intention of forgiving her, the calls from my mother-in-law ceased. After that, we didn't hear from her. However, we did receive a message from David's older sister who had been at the same gathering. My husband has one sister. She is a lot like David, not much for expressing her emotion. She isn't married yet, but I heard she has a fiancé. When I first met her, I greeted her and got a curt reply.
Oh, hello, I'm David's sister.
When I expressed to David that your sister might not approve of our marriage, he just laughed. No, it's the opposite. She was thrilled to have a sister. She's just shy around new people. Trust me, she was glad to talk to you today. That's what he told me. Her message read,
Michelle, I'm sorry about Mom today. Even though you say you know nothing about cooking, I believe in you.
She promised me that she who lives with their mother-in-law would
take responsibility and handle the trouble so you can rest easy.
From that point on, we never visited David's family home, and of course, we stopped communicating with my mother-in-law. That mother-in-law contacted me for the first time in years, and this was the reason. She hadn't changed a bit. Strangely, I found that refreshing. David's sister is a high-powered career woman who often travels for work, and her next trip was going to last 6 months. My mother-in-law, who hates being alone, couldn't bear it. David had told me she had no close friends because of her terrible personality. Well, we live close to David's family home, but we've had no interaction with them. So it's fine to just keep things as they are. That's how I felt, at least. Then one weekend, while David and I were enjoying a leisurely day, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Wondering who it could be, I checked the monitor and was taken aback. There, on the screen, was my mother-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in years. Hey, your mom is here. What? My husband, David, also looked very surprised, so it seemed he hadn't given her our address. Open up, quickly. As she started making a racket outside, considering the nuisance to our neighbors, we reluctantly let her in. Marching inside, my mother-in-law commented, This is my first time here, but the furniture is so plain and dreary. Is this your taste, Michelle? David and I both prefer simple things and have carefully chosen our interior. It may seem plain to some, but we like it. For me, David's parents' house with its clashing reds and blues is dizzying and exhausting. However, this is a matter of personal preference, and it's not about who is right or wrong. So it's not common to voice such opinions out loud. But my mother-in-law is far from common. She is the type to openly speak her mind. Why did you come here? If you came to say such things, could you please leave? When David spoke coldly, my mother-in-law momentarily grimaced, then she turned to me and suddenly prostrated herself. Michelle, I'm sorry about that time. It seems I misunderstood something and caused you distress. I couldn't immediately trust her, but when I said, I'm sorry too, she smirked for a moment, but then took my hand and suggested that we should get along better from now on. I was also pleased to be recognized by her, as I didn't want to be disliked. She proposed to David and me that we should have dinner together on the weekends. David made a worried face and asked me, Are you okay? But I was tired of running away, so I agreed to her proposal. I'll prepare everything, so don't worry about anything and just come and eat. With that, she cheerfully went home. If something happens again, let me know right away. If anything happens again, we'll cut ties completely. David's words alone were reassuring to me. We headed to David's parents' house that weekend. The in-laws' house, which I hadn't seen in years, was just as it was, but remembering what had happened made me feel a bit sick. As we entered the house, my mother-in-law greeted us cheerfully. On the table were David's favorite steak and salad, and then in a small dish, oh no, stew. Just like that day, stew was served. This time, they were lightly colored. Come on, eat up. Eating alone isn't fun, so I got excited and made too much. Bracing for something to happen, but nothing seemed off, I took her word and started eating. As I ate, my mother-in-law watched me with a smirk. After I finished eating, she seemed unhappy. Seeing her like that, I thought, serves you right. Once back home, I immediately ran to the toilet. David was worried, asking what was wrong. Are you okay? Should we go to the hospital? He offered, but after taking some stomach medicine and lying down for a while, I felt better. I still felt a little unwell the next morning, so I took the day off from work. I'm sure it was because of that. That's what I thought. However, since I couldn't confirm that my illness was due to my mother-in-law's cooking, I didn't discuss it with David. After all, it wouldn't feel good to see or hear about his mother, who was supposed to be on my side, doing something as petty as harassing me. I decided to discuss it after I had solid evidence. I would come to regret this decision. The following weekend, we were invited by my mother-in-law again and headed to the in-laws' house. The menu for the day was roasted pork, and almost mockingly, there was stew in the small dish again. That day too, my mother-in-law stared at me as I ate. Once again, she watched me, my face unchanging with a bored look. Just like the previous week, I felt ill on the way home and ended up vomiting in the car. David, sensing something serious was amiss, immediately took me to an emergency clinic. The diagnosis was food poisoning. Did you eat anything spoiled? Without hesitation, I replied yes. Fortunately, my condition didn't worsen and I recovered by the next day. Of course, I discussed the situation with David. In fact, I told him I suspected that my mother-in-law had used spoiled ingredients in the dishes she served me. The first time I tasted the steak, I noticed an unpleasant taste the moment I took the first bite. The inside was nearly the color of raw meat. The fact that David didn't say anything made it clear that my mother-in-law had intentionally tampered with my portion. The vegetables in the stew were also nearly raw, barely cooked. Even the bread tastes stale, while David and my mother-in-law had fresh baked bread. My soup was the only one without any ingredients. The roasted pork from the other day was the same. When I flipped the meat, I could see that it was hardly cooked. Despite all this, I finished my meal entirely out of stubbornness. Seeing my mother-in-law's frustrated face as I remained unfazed, I felt a bit relieved. However, David was pretty mad at me for keeping quiet about it. The next day on his way back from work, David said he would talk to his mother and headed for their house. As expected, my mother-in-law played dumb, but David was not one to let it slide. He reportedly told her, "We are cutting ties. Don't contact us again." My mother-in-law hadn't anticipated being cut off and resisted, but David's resolve did not waver. Seeing David like this, she finally gave in and agreed to his terms, but only after proposing one condition of her own. "And what's that condition?" I asked. "It turns out my sister is getting married. She wants to introduce her fiancé and asked us to have a meal together one last time." "I don't think she'll do anything strange in front of the fiancé. Of course, if you're not comfortable, Michelle, I can go alone," he assured me. I had no desire to visit the in-laws' house ever again, but I had always received help from David's sister and I thought they wouldn't do anything strange in front of the fiancé. Deciding this would be the last time, I agreed to attend. A few days later, I received a call from my mother-in-law. Honestly, I was hesitant to pick it up, but curiosity about what she would say got the better of me and I answered the phone. "Hello?" "I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to answer. It's about the dinner at our house." "Yes, what is it?" I replied impassively. My mother-in-law seemed a bit displeased, but it was I who had the right to be angry. By the time I picked up the phone, there was not a single apology for what had happened. In the end, it seemed like a light matter to my mother-in-law. I thought I could never forgive her. "It turns out my daughter's fiancé has many allergies. I've never thought about it before, but I wondered about you two. You know, with the meal preparation and all," she stated. Upon hearing this, I said, "Is that so? We watched a program about allergy tests on TV last year and decided to take them. Turns out, we found out we're allergic to shellfish. It's surprising. It can manifest even in adults." Hearing this, my mother-in-law's voice noticeably brightened, even over the phone. "Oh, is that so? I'll be careful on that day then, so don't worry." With that, she abruptly hung up. That night, I reported to David about the call from my mother-in-law. And then, when I told her about our allergy, she just hung up right away. David listened quietly to my story. The following month, the day of the meal at my in-laws' house arrived. Upon arriving, I saw my mother-in-law in the kitchen. Thinking I should help out like a proper daughter-in-law, at least for the last time, I offered to assist her. "Don't come in here." We were taken aback by my mother-in-law's unusually loud voice. "All right, just consider yourselves guests today, since it's the last time," my mother-in-law insisted. We decided to take her up on the offer, wondering if it was her way of showing remorse. Just as the meal was ready, my sister-in-law texted my mother-in-law. "Running late, start without me." Given the time, we decided to begin eating. The food looked normal. As I hesitantly started eating, my mother-in-law laughed and said, "Do you think I did something again? You're a wicked woman, Michelle. Was the food poisoning really my fault?" She was still on about that when David glared at her. "If you want to talk like that, we can leave right now." Whether she was frightened or not, my mother-in-law fell silent. "Let's forget about what's done and done. Try the soup, Michelle. It turned out really well," she said. Forget what's done and done? The perpetrator has no right to say that. I thought to myself, but I couldn't just not drink it. As I lifted the soup bowl, David chimed in. "Is it really that good? Let me try," and took the bowl from me. Wait, that's meant for Michelle," my mother-in-law shouted, but it was too late. Ugh. David suddenly looked in pain and collapsed. My mother-in-law was panicking. "Call an ambulance, hurry! Why?" She tried calling out to him, but he was unresponsive. My mother-in-law was on the brink of tears from the panic. As I watched her, I asked, "What's in the soup?" "It looked like normal vegetable soup." "Shut up. That's not important right now," she retorted. "I'm the one who will accompany him to the hospital. I need to tell them what he ate. So what's in the soup?" "It's just normal vegetable soup." "Isn't it? You probably already know, but the person with the shellfish allergy is David, not me." Unable to bluff any longer, my mother-in-law admitted, "It's a vegetable soup with the broth made from shrimp and crab. I don't understand how this happened. I made it for you." "So it would have been fine if it was me?" "Of course, you even lied about having a shellfish allergy. If something happens to my son, I won't forgive you." My mother-in-law, who had brazenly shifted the blame onto me, declared this while glaring at me. I had never once said that I had an allergy. It was all just her jumping to conclusions. If you understand, call the ambulance. No need to. A low voice resounded, and David, who had been in pain, slowly got up. I didn't drink the soup. I wanted to see a reaction. I didn't think it would turn out like this, though. In fact, David was the one who proposed this plan. When we first addressed my mother-in-law, David and I noticed something. My mother-in-law didn't realize, but we could clearly see the shrimp and crab that had likely been used for the broth. I looked at the food laid out on the table. There was no trace of shrimp or crab anywhere. We thought that it must be the soup and exchanged glances. Of course, David didn't touch his soup at all. If nothing happens today, I was considering reconnecting, as Michelle suggested, but you. I didn't know how serious an allergy could be, she claimed. That's not possible. Seeing her panic when David started to suffer, it was clear that ignorance was no excuse. The fact that she looked at David and thought it might be an allergic reaction was proof enough. Did you really do this thinking Michelle was allergic? I can't believe it. Never show your face to us again. When David said that, my mother-in-law snapped back, Fine, do as you wish. And to have a daughter-in-law who can't cook, it's embarrassing. I have my daughter. I'll rely on her for the rest of my life. I don't need you. And with that, she started laughing hysterically. Are you kidding me? Give us a break. Simultaneously, with that voice, the door of the next room opened. Standing there was my sister-in-law. My mother-in-law was surprised, her eyes wide open. Actually, we had told my sister-in-law everything. She thought it was something her mother would do, and depending on the outcome, she said she would cut ties too. The dinner with her fiancé was also a lie made up by David and my sister-in-law. She had sneaked back home while my mother-in-law was cooking and hid. I saw everything and I heard it all. Was this how you were planning to torment my fiancé if he didn't meet your standards? I would never do something so terrible, my mother-in-law claimed, but David shouted back, That's exactly what you've done! Recognize that you're the one in the wrong! This left my mother-in-law utterly deflated. Anyway, pack up and leave by the end of this month. Since Dad's divorce, I've been paying the rent and the property is in my name. What? Even if you try to stay, it's useless. I'm canceling the lease at the end of this month. My sister-in-law really was getting married and had decided on a new home, and that destination was Singapore. There was no way to follow. The responsible sister-in-law had been looking after her useless mother-in-law who showed no signs of wanting to work after the divorce. Although my sister-in-law was fed up, she had told her fiancé and was still planning on living together. But she could not live with her mother who might threaten her precious fiancé's life. Her act, which disregarded life even if it was an attempt, was enough to anger my sister-in-law. It would be too late if something happened. That's what my mother-in-law had done. Even if you try to depend on us, it's futile. We have already moved and will absolutely not tell you our new address. When I said that, my mother-in-law glared at me. Also, you call me a bad cook, but after that day, I worked hard because I was frustrated. I've been going to cooking classes and have now become quite a good cook. Since I found out about David's allergy, I've been careful with our meals and even got a qualification in nutrition management and food education through correspondence. When I told her that I'm now a better cook than she is, she looked frustrated. Please take care of yourself, I said coldly, and David and I left his parents' house. After that, my sister-in-law told us that my ex-mother-in-law cried and begged her daily. She ignored all of it, and when my mother-in-law saw her packing, she called her a disobedient child and disappeared from the house. In the meantime, my sister-in-law moved and successfully departed for Singapore. Now she is married and living happily. By the way, David's father contacted him a while ago. Even though they were divorced, David and his sister sometimes stayed in touch with their father. According to him, the ex-mother-in-law suddenly appeared at his workplace. I could marry you again, you know. For some reason, she said such an absurd thing to him. Of course, he didn't entertain the idea and had her taken away by security. However, the story didn't end there. She apparently followed him home and barged in. He already has a new family, but the ex-mother-in-law didn't seem to know and screamed, "You're cheating!" The police were called immediately and she was taken away. His father's current wife is a very cheerful person and knows about the past where he was oppressed by his ex-wife's high-handed attitude. If she comes again, I'll brandish pans in both hands to scare her off. She seemed to be quite spirited about the situation, so it seemed okay. We don't know what happened to my ex-mother-in-law after that. With her personality, she's likely to survive, but it's certain she'll have a hard time as she has no one to rely on. It's karma. We as a couple are living peacefully in our new home. I quit my job and David was headhunted by a company with better conditions than before and changed jobs. In fact, shortly after that, we found out I was pregnant. David was present at the birth and his cry of joy echoed louder than the baby's first cry. Seeing David crying so much, the doctors and nurses were laughing, but I thought again that I was glad I married him.